Hey everyone, and welcome back. Thank you for watching. First off, I want to say I really appreciate you taking time to watch this video. And you've already clicked that subscribe button. Thank you for your support. It means a lot to me. My goal here is simple. That is to help you understand this material, not just memorize it so you can pass the state exam or the class exam, but for you to feel confident moving forward in your real estate career. Now in today's video, we're diving into chapter 2, property ownership and interest. And this is the most important chapter that we're going to cover so far. So let's jump in. Chapter 2, property ownership and interest. This is where everything starts to come together. But let's be real with you. Most people struggle here because there's a lot of vocabulary. There are concepts that stack on top of each other, and if you don't understand the why, you can get lost really fast. So, if you lock in, you're putting yourself in a strong position to pass. Before we jump in, let me give you a quick preview of what we're going to hit on today in this video. So today we're going to cover the bundle of rights. We're going to talk about water rights, personal property versus real property. We kind of talked about that a little bit in the first video. We're going to talk about the categories of estates like freehold and leasehold estates. We're going to talk about methods of taking title. This is a big one. Condominiums and timeshare rules, and then encumbrance and easements. A few other key concepts also along the way. So don't worry if this sounds like a lot, because it really is. By the end of this video though, it's all going to connect together. I have also provided for you a resource for you to take notes, and you can find that link in the comments below. So let's get started. Let's jump with the foundation section 1. What is real estate ownership? Real estate is not just land. It is your legal right to own that land. You either own it with a freehold estate or you lease it with a leasehold estate. Ownership is control. Leasing is temporary use. And so everything in this chapter builds off of that idea. Let's move on to section 2, bundle of rights. When you own property, you just don't own dirt. You own rights. And so this is called the bundle of rights. Think of it for the exam or for this class as deep sea. When I say deep sea, I'm not talking about the ocean. I'm talking about sea, like the letter C. So we've got D-E-E-P, C, D, disposition. You can sell it. You have the right to sell it, disposition. E, exclusion. You have the right to keep people out or off of your property. E, enjoyment. You have the right to use your property. P, possession. You have the right to occupy your property. And then C, control. Decide how it is used. So an example of this, when you buy a house, you can live in it, you can choose to rent it, or you can sell it. But you can't ignore the laws such as zoning or HOA rules. Ownership has its limits. And if you remember when we talked about in the previous video, chapter 1, appurtenances, remember I struggled with that word. Appurtenances are things that run with the land, such as laws, zoning, and HOA. They transfer automatically when that property is sold. That is easements and rights and improvements. If it's attached to the land, then likely it transfers with it. Now in section 3, real property versus personal property. We've talked about this a little bit earlier in chapter 1, but let's hit it on it again because it tends to be a test favorite. Personal property is movable. Real property is permanent. But here's the key to that. It's all about the intent. So for example, a couch in a living room of a house, that is personal property. A refrigerator in a kitchen of a house, that's personal property. But a dishwasher, that's a fixture. A ceiling fan, that is a fixture. Fixtures become real property. So fixtures were at one time personal property. Think of it like when they're in the box and you bought it. But when you attach it to the property, it becomes real property, and then it transfers with the property. So such as a dishwasher or a ceiling fan, they're personal property the moment you purchase them, but when you take them out of the box and you attach it to the ceiling or you put it into the cabinet, they become a fixture and they stay with the property. Let's move on to section 4, water rights. Water rights. There are two types of water rights. There's riparian, that's rivers. There's littoral, that's lakes and ocean. So for us to understand this, for non-navigable rivers, creeks and streams, your property line goes to the center of that river or creek or stream. Now for navigable rivers, lakes and oceans, your property line extends to the edge of the water. So small water, it's split. It's split down the middle. Non-navigable rivers, your property line goes to the center of it. Big water goes onto the edge. Big water, lakes, oceans, and navigable rivers, your property line goes to where the water begins. Section 5, types of estates. This is a big one. We need to understand this because a lot of our knowledge and information is going to build upon this. We have fee simple absolute. Fee simple absolute, that's the highest form of ownership. There are no conditions and it's the most common. For example, when you buy a house, it's yours. It's your house, it's your property, fee simple absolute. So we're just talking about fee absolute. That's when you have full ownership, no strings attached. But let's change that a little bit. What if you own a property, but there were conditions that were attached to that ownership? That's what we call defeasible fee estate. Defeasible fee estate. That is ownership with conditions. Defeasible fee estate is ownership with conditions, meaning you own the property, but if you break a rule, you could lose it. You could lose that property. Here's an example, and this is where a lot of people get tripped up. And there are two types of this ownership here of defeasible. First is condition subsequent. Think of it as you can do anything to this property except this one thing. It could be a seller transfers land to a buyer, and the seller says this: you can use this land for anything as long as you don't build a gas station. If that person builds a gas station, the original owner has the right to take that back. They have a right to take it back. So the key here is you have broad freedom, but there's one restriction. If you break that restriction, you could lose that property. Now on the flip side, there's determinable. Determinable is the opposite. You can only use the property for one purpose. For one purpose. Let's say that someone is giving the property, a property, to a school district. The land can only be used for a school. If they stop using it as a school, ownership automatically goes back to that owner, goes back to that previous owner. So instead of having freedom with one restriction, you are limited to one specific use. You can only use it for this one thing. So looking at it as a side-by-side comparison, here's the easiest way to remember this. Condition subsequent, don't do this one thing. Determinable, you can only do this one thing. And so if you ever see a question, the way to remember the strict one is always determinable. Is always determinable. The strictest one is determinable. So now once you understand this difference, this becomes much easier for you down the road. So let's move on to the next type of estate. that is a life estate. A life estate is based on someone's life. When they die, the property transfers, and it's not transferable to the heirs. It goes back to the original person or to someone else that's specifically stated. So for example, a mother gives her house to her son, but only for the life of he is alive. As long as he's alive, he can use that property, he can benefit from it. But when he dies, the property goes back to the mother or to someone else if it's specific or specified. So a life estate is ownership measured by someone's life. Now in chapter 6, we're talking about the methods of taking title. Very important. Don't get confused here. A way of taking title is in severity. Severity. That is one owner. 100% ownership. And all that means is one person owns the property. John buys a house in his name only. No partners, no spouse on the deed, no co-owners. The property is owned in severity. Now, don't let the word several confuse you. It sounds like multiple people, but think of it as severality. All the rights have been severed away, leaving just one owner. So in severality means one owner. What do you think we call it when there's more than one owner? We call it concurrent ownership. Concurrent ownership. You don't necessarily need to know that, but when it's more than one owner, it's concurrent ownership. And that gives us tenancy in common. Tenancy in common. This is the most common, and it's used for unmarried people and with unequal shares are allowed in this, so no survivorship. What that means is when one owner dies, their share does not go to other owners, it goes to the heirs. Their three friends decide to buy an investment property together. John owns 50%, Sarah owns 30%, and Mike owns 20%. They all own the same property, but they own it in different percentages. This is tenancy in common. If John dies, his 50% does not go to Sarah and Mike. Instead, it goes to John's heirs, like his family. So tenancy in common equals have unequal shares, and it goes to the heirs if someone dies. There's a different type of ownership called joint tenancy. Joint tenancy. What joint tenancy is that it's equal shares and it has right of survivorship. This is when two or more people own property together, but they want something very specific. They want survivorship. They each own 50% and they choose joint tenancy. If one of them dies, then their share automatically goes to the other owner. Now, what we need to understand in North Carolina, it's very different from other states. Survivorship must be stated on the deed. It is not automatic like it is in other states. So you need to know if it's stating joint tenancy in North Carolina, you need to understand it's not always the right of survivorship. You want to make sure that you read that test question well. So if joint tenancy is for people who want survivorship, it must be stated on the deed. Now, Donnie, what about married people? Which one would work for them? That's where we move into joint tenancy by entirety. Tenancy by the entirety is for married couples only. That is automatic survivorship, and it's 50-50 ownership. So what you'll see this in real world, it takes one person to buy, but two to sell. You may hear this, one to buy, two to sell. You know, if a married couple is buying property, only one spouse goes out and purchases it. If they could sign the paperwork, get the loan, and take title, and the other spouse doesn't even have to be there. But here's the thing, when it comes time to sell that property, you need both spouses involved. Because in North Carolina, married couples typically own property as tenants by the entirety. Tenants by the entirety. So it's important for us to understand this, and it's really because of survivorship. This is why survivorship is so important. When one owner dies, their shares transfer instantly. No probate, no waiting, and what this does, without survivorship, it keeps the property from being stuck in probate for years. That's why we need to understand the different types of ownerships. Let's move on to section 7. Condos, co-ops, and timeshares. Condos is very common in North Carolina, and so let's talk about how that ownership works. And it's actually split into two parts with condo ownership. The condo unit itself is fee simple. Common areas are tenancy in common. So with the condo unit, it's fee simple, and what that means is when you buy a condo, you own the unit in fee simple. It's yours. You fully own the inside of that unit just like you would a house. But what about the common areas? That's where tenancy in common comes in place. This is where it changes. You also have shares of the common areas, and you have that through tenancy in common. Tenancy in common. Examples of that would be hallways, elevators, pools, gyms, parking lots, and the roof. The unit is yours alone, but the shared spaces belong to everyone together. So now that you have an idea of how condos work, let's talk about something completely different with co-ops and then timeshares. And honestly, this is where people get confused with condominiums, with co-ops, and with timeshares. Now with a co-op, you do not own real estate. Listen, with a co-op, don't be confused, you do not own real estate. You do not even own the unit. But instead, you own shares in the corporation or in a corporation, and that corporation owns the entire building that that unit is in. So there's no ownership, but you have shares and maybe a lease. So with a co-op, shares in a company and a right to occupy a unit. So a quick comparison between a condo and a co-op. With a condo, you own the unit. With the co-op, you don't own the unit, but you own shares of the corporation that owns the unit. So if a condo is ownership, and if a co-op is shares that you own in a corporation, what about properties only used part-time? That's where we move into timeshares. Timeshares is actually a pretty easy concept because you're buying time, really. And if you remember this rule on the exam, you'll do well. A timeshare is when you don't own the property full time. You own it and you have the right to use it for a certain period each year. And for that in North Carolina exam, you'll remember the $5. You want to remember the 5x5 rule. What the 5x5 rule? It applies to timeshares. You have 5 uses over at least 5 years and a 5-day cancellation period. Let's say you buy a timeshare at the beach. You can use it 1 week every year for at least 5 years. That meets the requirement. Now here's the part of the exam loves to question you on. After you sign the contract, you have 5 days to cancel the timeshare. No penalty, you get your money back. So timeshare equals vacation property on a schedule. So now that we've covered that with condos, condominiums, co-ops, and timeshares, let's move on to another big topic, Section 8, government rights. Eminent domain. Eminent domain is the government takes land for public use and it pays for it. A homeowner owns land where the highway needs to go. The government can take that land as long as they provide just compensation to that owner. Now, Escheat, that's no heirs. The state gets it. A property owner dies and they have no will, and they have no heirs, no family members to inherit the property. So what happens? It goes to the state. The state gets that property. Police power. Police power, regulate. When you hear police power, think of regulate, not necessarily meaning someone in a patrol car with a badge and a uniform. The government tells you what you can and cannot do with your property, such as zoning laws. So for example, you own a piece of land, but zoning laws say you can only build a single family home, not a commercial building. That's police power. They regulate, they enforce the zoning laws. Now, taxation, that's pretty easy. It's taxes. When you own a home, every year you have to pay property taxes to that county, and that's done through taxation. Section 9, our final section here in this video, easements and encroachments. Easements, that's the right to use someone else's land for a specific purpose. Let's say you own a piece of land, but your property is landlocked. The only way to get to it is by driving across the neighbor's property. So you are given the right to cross their land. Now, there are two types of an easement. There's a dominant easement and there's a servient easement. The dominant easement, the property that is benefited by the easement. The servient easement, that's the property that is burdened by the easement. The dominant property is your property. You need to drive across your neighbor's land to access your property. That makes your neighbor's property the servient property, because it is serving your property to allow access to that property. Let's talk about encroachments. An encroachment is a physical intrusion onto someone else's land. Now, a lot of times we see people get confused with easements, but think of encroachments as a physical intrusion. You don't choose to do that. It doesn't happen with a written documentation. Think of it as like a garage over a line or a fence over a property line. That is an encroachment. Now that we've covered all of these things, I want you to take moments and focus on these following things that we hit on today. If you take nothing else from this, really focus and concentrate on the tenancy types, survivorship, defeasible versus fee simple, encroachments versus easements, condos, and timeshares. If you know those things, you're in a strong position when you're taking the exam. If this video has helped you, just hit subscribe below so you don't miss out on the next video of Chapter 3 when it comes out. And also, follow me on Facebook for more real estate tips. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And you can email me, Donnie@excelrealestateschool.com, or just give me a call. I'll be more than glad to speak with you and help you, because I am here for you from licensing to close.